Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people that want the best info, but just don't have the time. Get your podcast fix with the Cliff Notes versions of your favorite podcasts. No fluff, just the actionable golden nuggets. Having this much knowledge at your fingertips should be downright illegal. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with SatoriPrime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello. Welcome to another Performance Enhancing Podcast. Hi, everyone. So first of all, before we get into today's podcast, if you haven't heard, we're running a contest. The contest will run out in about a week's time. And all you have to do to enter to win is leave a review and comment on our iTunes page. All the instructions are at SatoriPrime.com/podcast contest. Again, SatoriPrime.com/podcast contest. Every single person that leaves a rating or review will win at least a consultation with us. Others will win a $100 gift certificate to anything Satori Prime World. And the grand prize winner will actually win a free one-on-one session with myself and my brother to analyze and strategize any part of your business. So again, all you have to do to enter, head over to SatoriPrime.com/podcast contest, and all of the steps that you need to follow are printed there. Now, I'm super excited to get back to the Foundation podcast today because for those of you that don't know, the Foundation podcast is actually run by a guy named Andy Drish, who I've actually become pretty friendly with. And I found this specific podcast because the headline was, Learn the 67 Steps to Becoming a Millionaire. How to Live the Good Life and the Grand Theory of Everything, with a gentleman that I also know, Tai Lopez, who I'd never actually heard be on a podcast before. So it turns out he's got his own podcast now, which I listen to. So we're going to kind of do like a 1-2 punch, once hearing him on the Foundation and once a review of his actual podcast. I highly recommend following this gentleman. He is a genius beyond genius. So this is a little bit about Tai. He reads a book every single day. So if you sign up to Tai's newsletter, which I think has like 1-point-something million people on it, he actually gives you a book review of the book he read that day. But here are a few interesting facts about Tai. Tai Lopez reads a book every day, is a member of Mensa. He loves salsa dancing, has read 5,000 books so far, and is responsible for 12 multi-million-dollar companies. He lives next door to Carmen Diaz and Katy Perry, and he credits all of this through his study of life. So without saying much more about Tai, I just want to jump into the golden nuggets of this podcast because there really were a lot of them. So the first thing they spoke about is how Hollywood actually controls everything and how they control media as far as what we wear, what we listen to, what we like and don't like. And that's all because of something that Tai calls the association bias. It's the fact that human beings look for social proof for what they should like, which is pretty astounding. So while everyone kind of hates on Hollywood, me being one of them, I think he does have a very, very valid point that media today is run by Hollywood, by athletes, by movie stars, etc. It's amazing how obsessed we are with following them and figuring out what they like and what they wear and all that stuff, and that trickles down. So I thought it's just important to point that out because some of you may not notice that you do this, and it's really interesting to kind of start looking at, well, why do I wear the things I wear, and why do I drive the car I drive, or why do I live where I live, or why do I like the music or the movies, etc. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. Now, after that, he went much, much deeper, and that's where this whole thing got really, really interesting. Now, Tai has what he's crammed down into the 67 things you must do in order to become a millionaire. So no, it's not like a 3-step process to become a millionaire, but like Tai says, it's also not a 100,000-step process to become a millionaire. He's actually chunked it down to 67, and if you go to his website, you can actually grab the 67 steps. Now, one of the books that he had mentioned, which I haven't read yet, but I'm now supremely curious about, is Gary Keller's The One Thing. And this book is all about the one thing that makes you unique and how to find that one thing. And so during this podcast, he actually delved into how to find that one thing. So the strategy that he had actually suggested is to do what he calls the 4-circle exercise. And what you basically look at are 4 things, and you draw these 4 circles, and then where the 4 circles meet, that is your calling. That is your true destiny. So here are the questions you need to be asking yourself. The first is, what did you grow up around? In other words, what kind of family, what kind of lifestyle, what kind of people, etc. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, what were you acknowledged for as a kid by strangers? So in other words, some kids are acknowledged for being funny, some acknowledged for being smart, others acknowledged for being good athletes. So just kind of look at what were you acknowledged for as a kid. Number 3, what have you done for work for the last 10 years? So kind of look at what type of work you've been doing for the last 10 years. And number 4, what can you talk about with your friends effortlessly? In other words, if you just sit there and someone asks you a question, what are topics and things that just roll out of you effortlessly? And in the concentration of those 4 circles, you're going to find your true destiny. So I actually did this myself, and I was trying to figure out what mine is. Now, this is a process. This is not something that, magically you snap your fingers and will just happen. But basically what you're trying to establish is your life's destiny. Now, how do you know whether you're living your life's destiny or not? I'm actually going to go into that in much more depth, because in a podcast I listened to of Tai Lopez on his podcast, he actually talks about this much deeper. But just to give you a concept. So life's destiny is basically finding your purpose, whereby, and I experience this every day, you can work 14, 18-hour days and it does not seem like work to you. In other words, you are so passionate and so obsessed with what you do, that's when you know you found your destiny. So if you're getting out of bed at 5, 6, 7 in the morning and literally hating your life and thinking like, oh God, I got another day of work and blah, 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 you have not found your life destiny. Okay? If you roll out of bed passionate, excited about your day, what you're going to do, another thing to look for, and I think this is a great line, if you don't know what day it is this week, then you've most likely found your life's destiny. So it's really funny. I end up asking my wife at least 3 times a week, what day is today? That way I kind of know what I'm doing. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter, because every day when you're living life's destiny is just an opportunity to make a difference. It's just an opportunity to live your passion. So kind of the things that I looked for in my circles were, okay, I grew up in an immigrant family, okay, parents that worked really, really hard. And I was taught from a very, very young age that hard work is very, very important, okay? Now, what was I acknowledged for as a kid? I was actually very, very good speaker from a very young age. I was always kind of like the life of the party. I loved to dance when I was a young kid. I had no shame in being in front of anyone or performing for anyone. And I was kind of always acknowledged by strangers for those qualities, okay? Now, what have I done for work for the last 10 years? Well, prior to becoming an online marketer and teaching entrepreneurs, what I did previously was I was always in sales, no matter what, always in some sort of sales position, and always excelled to some sort of mentorship role. So even in my commercial real estate business, I ran the entire sales team. That was my responsibility. Now I train entrepreneurs, thousands of entrepreneurs all around the world. And what can I talk about effortlessly is, in fact, pushing people to what they believe is possible. So, and effortlessly would be like training people how to market and push the boundaries of what they believe is possible in their marketing careers. Push the boundaries of what people believe is holding them back mindset-wise. These are things that I can do endlessly. So when I put all of those things together, it's like hard work, immigrant mentality, always performing, always in sales, always training. And now what I talk about effortlessly is training, education, marketing, etc. So when I look at all those, the job that I'm doing today, which is in fact training entrepreneurs who are struggling, right? So I have that whole arena and whole background of struggling parents, etc. And what am I trying to do in essence? I kind of thought of it. It's like trying to fix people that have that kind of lifestyle and trying to prove to them that they don't have to live that way, and trying to ignite people to actually fulfill on their life's passions. So when I put it all together, I was like, oh man, obviously, all those tie together. So do that exercise for yourself, because it's really, really interesting when you kind of start looking. Because if you find that you're not living your life's destiny, one of the things that Tai said, it's way better to find out now than be down that road 30, 40 years and be like, oh crap, I missed my opportunity. Now, the next piece of that is you want to distill what you do into one sentence. So in other words, if you ran into a billionaire in an elevator and he asked you what you do, the way he's going to know whether you know your life's destiny is if you can distill it into one sentence. So my one sentence is, I break down the walls to what people believe is possible in their lives. That's my life's mission. And if someone asks, how do I do that? I explain to them, I turn people's passions into dollars in their bank account. Now, both of those are very, very clear statements, which is another point that Tai made, which is this needs to be so clear. He uses the 96-year-old grandma rule. If your 96-year-old grandma, whether you have one or not, he does not understand your line, then it is not a powerful statement. You want to boil it down to its essence. So if I said to someone, I turn people's passions into money in their bank accounts, that is very, very self-explanatory. There's no word there that's iffy. There's nothing that's kind of like, woohoo, I don't understand what that is. So again, look at the 4 circles and then boil it down into the one sentence essence. Okay? Now, Tai's sentence, which will bring us to the next piece of the conversation, is that he, and I'm going to reword it slightly, but he basically looks for really, really great business models that he can go 50-50 on. So he looks for opportunities to invest in companies where he can be 50-50 partners with the person that has a really, really great idea. Now, he's also been mentored by some billionaires, and what Andy asked was, well, how do you ever make an impression on a billionaire? And Tai very, very simply said, be interesting. What does that mean? So for example, the average person will read 12 books a year. Okay? 1 book a month. You want to be more interesting? Read a book a week. Knowledge, my friends, is power. The more knowledge you have, the more powerful and interesting you will be. Hence why I created the Performance Enhancing Podcast, because in essence, what have I done for me? I've put myself in a context where I know I need to deliver content to you every Monday and every Thursday, twice a week, right? Now, that pushes me to obtain more knowledge. That pushes me to read more books, listen to more podcasts, etc., which in essence does what? Increase my value, correct? What I'm trying to do is distill that value to you so that you can grab it in a very quick fashion. So this Performance Enhancing Podcast is basically what Tai Lopez is talking about. I put myself in that sandbox where I have to build sandcastles twice a week, right? So look in your life. If there's something you want to achieve, how can you structure your life to give yourself that kind of context that will push you? And notice that I did it in such a way where you guys count on me, right? You expect a podcast every Monday and every Thursday. I can't weasel out the back door and be like, oh, I just don't feel like doing it today. Because you know what? Then it wouldn't be effective. If you listen to episode 40 with John Lee Dumas, that was one of the things he said. Frequency. Frequency. Consistent action is what makes things stick. So again, be more interesting. And how do you break that down? How do you actually grow your potential? How do you actually put yourself in that context? Well, Tai suggested the law of 33s, which I'd never heard before. And the law of 33s is 33% of your day should be spent with people that have less education or less information than you do, and it's your job to quote unquote lead that group of 33, okay? Another 33% of your day should be spent with your peers, people who are equal. You mastermind, you brainstorm, you think about ideas and talk about ideas that does what? Push your value, push your educational level. Now, the last 33, which I think is a piece that I would venture to say a lot of people miss, myself included, but I'm trying to consciously now think about it more, is to spend 33% with people who are 20 years ahead of you in your current profession. Now, I want you to think about that. 20 years ahead of you in your current profession. And this is where you need to be interesting, right? Because why would someone 20 years ahead of you have any interest to mentor you or to even speak with you? And the answer is be interesting. So a person like Tai, who's read 5,000 books, makes a very good case, right? And like he said, billionaires are just human beings, right? They can't know everything. And if you can bring something to the table, a perspective, information, something that makes a difference for them, then they'll be likely to communicate with you. So I heard this, and the first thing I thought after I got off this podcast is, my God, this Tai Lopez is really impressive. Now, he and I had sent a couple of messages way back in the day. But the first thing I did as soon as I finished the podcast is I messaged Tai and I said, look, I think our missions are truly aligned. And I think that I can provide value in how to get your message out there in a much bigger way. I would love to connect with you. Guys, not more than 2 hours later, Tai and I had scheduled for us to speak just a couple of days later. Now, normally, I would have not had the balls to ever approach a man like Tai. But you know what? I've gotten to a point, thank you to this podcast and thank you for me pushing myself, where I truly believe that I have something to offer even to someone like Tai. Now, I want you to look in your life. There is something that you can offer every single person. Every single person. And when you truly believe that you can offer that thing to every single person, then nothing should hold you back from ever reaching out to anyone that you would like. What is the worst thing that person's going to say? No? Okay, that's it. Tai could have said no, and that would have been it. Actually not, because I probably would have hounded him for a little while. But he even told a great story of his buddy who wanted to get mentored by this great real estate mogul and went to his door 17 days in a row. And obviously this billionaire had, some person opening the door. And on the 17th day, the guy basically just said, I really feel bad for you. He's not going to meet you, but here's what I'll do. Hide behind that fern. And he leaves his office to go up to this and this floor. And you'll have basically between this floor and that floor to convince him to possibly work with you. And you know what? The guy did it, spoke to this billionaire, got him to mentor him. And by the time he was 24 years old, was making millions of dollars. So don't ever let the thought that you can't offer someone something stop you. You'd be amazed how generous and great people at the top are. They got there for a reason, and they stayed there for that reason. So if I can leave you with anything on this podcast, is to just start believing in yourself and start pushing yourself to be of value for those people, so that last 33% you can actually contribute to. Now, the last thing is just an analogy that Tai used, which I thought was really clever. So I'm in marketing, obviously. We are literally the most marketed to human beings ever. In fact, between 2,000 to 4,000 marketing messages are thrown at us, get this, each and every day. 2,000 to 4,000 messages each and every day. That means on computer, on our phones, on our TV, on billboards, radio, etc. 2,000 to 4,000 separate marketing messages. So what he says has happened is basically in our brain, we basically have a bouncer. Think of a bouncer in a club, like Studio 54 back in the day. The guy stood out there and basically said, okay, you're good looking enough to come in. And then we'd just ignore all these people and just point at things. So because we get so much data thrown at us each and every day, we've had to kind of develop this bouncer inside our head. It's the only thing that's keeping us sane. So I'd never heard that analogy. I just thought it was really clever. And you want to start noticing what this bouncer is allowing into your consciousness, is allowing for you to listen to. And a lot of the times, the messages that get through are not the ones that you necessarily like. And I'm talking about now all sorts of messages, not just marketing messages, right? So you want to just, if that kind of creates I'm a very visual learner. So if that kind of creates a vision for you of what is actually happening inside of your brain and how information gets processed, if there's something that is entering your space, entering your consciousness that you are not a fan of, well, train your bouncer to leave that shit out the door. Train your bouncer to not let that into your consciousness. Will that happen overnight? Absolutely not. Can you train that bouncer over a 2 to 3 week period to do so? I absolutely believe you can. But it's going to take something for you. So if that analogy helps you in kind of creating this filter, if you will, like it did for me, then it could give you a lot of power in your day-to-day life. So that, my friends, was the highlights for me in the Andy Drish Foundation podcast with Tai Lopez. And again, like I told you, I reached out to Tai. I already listened to his podcast. I will have him as an interviewee on an upcoming podcast, which I'm super, super excited about. But seriously, one of the smartest men I know or have ever spoken to. I highly recommend you connect with him. I highly recommend, if you have time, to actually listen to his podcast as well as Andy Drish's interview of him, because there's too many gems there for me to encapsulate in a few sentences. But we love to keep this short. So again, as always, thank you so much for listening, everyone. And make sure to head over to SatoriPrime.com/podcast contest to enter yourself for a chance to win a one-on-one consultation with myself and my brother for free, a $750 value, in addition to a bunch of other prizes that you can win. All you have to do is literally leave us a rating and a review. And this 2-week drawing, we will look at everyone that's entered a rating and a comment and then pick the winners from there. Very, very simple. What we're trying to do is get this performance enhancing podcast on the map in a big way in the iTunes store. So again, thank you so much for listening. Love you all, and we'll see you on the next performance enhancing podcast. Bye, everyone.